In the heart of a sprawling mansion where silence had become the loudest sound, a child sat frozen, alive, but locked inside a body that refused to move. His father, a billionaire drowning in grief and reputation, believed his only son was both autistic and paralyzed from birth. Doctors confirmed it. Specialists shrugged their shoulders. The boy lived as a fragile ornament in a golden cage. But everything changed the day a new maid arrived. She was not from the world of wealth. She carried scars carved by prejudice, whispers of injustice that trailed her everywhere. Yet she also carried a quiet strength and eyes that refused to look away. In her presence, the impossible began to stir. Subtle movements, silent signals, a truth buried deep under privilege and silence, waiting to be uncovered. The mansion loomed over the city like a monument to fortune. Its marble floors gleamed, its crystal chandeliers glittered, but the air inside was heavy, stagnant, haunted by absence. The billionaire had lost his wife years earlier, and with her, the last traces of warmth had vanished. His son, Daniel, had been born into this loneliness, a boy with golden hair and pale skin, strapped by doctors into wheelchairs, confined to his room or sometimes rolled out to the pool for fresh air. He never spoke, he rarely blinked. Medical files labeled him autistic, nonverbal, paralyzed. For years, the mansion echoed only with the clicking of polished shoes and the shallow reassurances of private nurses. The billionaire treated his son like an heirloom to be guarded, not a child to be understood. He provided the best equipment, the most expensive therapies, but never true presence. For him, the boy was both a source of shame and fragile pride, proof of bloodline, yet a visible reminder of imperfection. When the new maid arrived, everything shifted. She was a black woman in her 30s, wearing a crisp blue uniform with a plain apron. She carried herself quietly, respectful but not invisible. Her skin carried the silent story of countless doors shut in her face, of whispers behind her back in a society that still graded humanity by color. Inside the mansion, the billionaire saw her only as staff. The other workers dismissed her as unimportant. But the boy, Daniel, seemed to notice. Her name was Grace. Grace had not come for wealth. She had come for survival. Her own life beyond the gates was one of scarcity, where every coin stretched thin. But she carried with her something more valuable than money: patience, resilience, and an instinct for listening where others only assumed. In her first days, she noticed small things the nurses ignored: a twitch in the boy's finger when sunlight hit his eyes, a slight narrowing of his gaze when voices rose around him, a shallow breath that lingered longer when music drifted faintly from the radio. The others dismissed it. Reflexes, they said, random muscle spasms. But Grace saw patterns, and behind those patterns she sensed a trapped voice screaming to be heard. Grace began to test her instincts. She spent more time with Daniel, not as a patient, but as a child. She spoke to him softly while folding linens. She sang while cleaning his room. She placed colorful toys near his hands, watching the subtle flickers of his eyes. One afternoon, by the pool, she rolled him out beneath the glaring sun. Other maids whispered about her, mocking the way she lingered near him, wasting time on what they saw as a lost cause. But Grace knelt at his side, dipped a small ball into the water, and placed it near his fingers. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, barely perceptible, his hand twitched. The ball wobbled. His eyes widened, following its ripple. Grace's heart pounded. This was not paralysis, this was suppression. But why had no one else seen it? As days passed, she observed the subtle moments: a twitch in his jaw when his father entered, A blink timed perfectly when she asked yes or no questions. These were not random spasms, these were responses, buried beneath years of neglect, misdiagnosis, and dismissal. The injustice was suffocating. Daniel had been written off by the very world that was supposed to protect him, not because he was incapable, but because no one bothered to see him as human. Doctors cared more for their reputations than for possibilities. His father, blinded by grief and pride, had accepted the verdict. And the staff, mostly white, polished, unquestioning, dismissed Grace's observations as ignorance. "You're imagining things," one year sneered when she suggested Daniel could understand more than they thought. "Stick to your cleaning." But Grace knew what she saw. She knew what she felt in the boy's presence, and she refused to stay silent. Each small discovery deepened the mansion's tension. The billionaire grew suspicious of her attention. The staff whispered, ridiculing her background, questioning how someone like her could dare challenge medical authority. Their words dripped with prejudice, like, "Maids should clean, not think," or "Don't trust her judgment," or "She's only here because no one else wanted the job." Grace bore the sting of their words, but she would not let the Daniel's truth remain buried. The breaking point came one stormy evening. Rain lashed against the glass walls as thunder shook the mansion. Grace sat with Daniel in his dimly lit room. She had brought a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. Slowly, she moved it side to side. His eyes followed, unblinking, precise. "Once for yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Two for no." She asked simple questions. His blinks were deliberate. He was answering, communicating. Tears welled in Grace's eyes. This boy was not paralyzed in spirit. He was alive, aware, trapped in a misdiagnosis that had stolen years of his life. At that very moment, the billionaire entered the room, his footsteps sharp against the marble. He froze, watching Grace crouched with the flashlight, tears streaming as Daniel blinked in sequence. "What are you doing?" His voice cracked with fury. Grace's courage surged. She explained every detail, every signal, every pattern she had witnessed. The billionaire's face darkened, torn between disbelief and rage. He accused her of delusion, of overstepping her role, but then he turned to his son. "Daniel," he whispered, voice trembling, "if you understand me, blink once." And Daniel blinked. One slow, deliberate blink. The billionaire staggered back, his world collapsing in an instant. Years of neglect, shame, and silence unraveled. His son had been there all along, locked inside a cage built not by paralysis, but by prejudice, by assumptions, by a system too blind to care. Grace's truth shattered the lies, but it came at a cost. The staff erupted in whispers of outrage. Some accused her of fabricating hope. Others muttered that she only sought attention. Beneath their words lurked the deeper venom of racism, the disbelief that someone like Grace, dismissed as the help, could uncover what wealthy doctors and educated specialists had missed. The storm outside raged, but inside the mansion, a greater storm erupted. The collision of truth against pride, justice against silence. In the days that followed, the mansion transformed. The billionaire could no longer deny what he had witnessed. Specialists were called again, this time forced to acknowledge what Grace had proven. Daniel was not fully paralyzed. His autism did not erase his awareness. His body had limitations, but his mind was sharp, alert, hungry for recognition. Grace's persistence had uncovered years of neglect, and with it, a chance for redemption. The billionaire, once cold and distant, now faced his reflection. A father who had abandoned his child not out of cruelty, but out of unquestioning faith in a flawed system. a system that had dismissed Daniel because his condition was complex and dismissed Grace because of the color of her skin. The injustice was undeniable. A boy silenced by prejudice, a maid belittled by racism, both trapped in a house of wealth that had mistaken appearance for truth. But change had begun. Grace was no longer just a maid. She was Daniel's voice, his bridge to the world. The billionaire, humbled and broken, began to listen, not just to doctors, but to the child he had nearly lost in plain sight.
Daniel's blinks became words. His movements, once ignored, became milestones. And Grace, with her patience and resilience, became the symbol of a truth too powerful to bury: that dignity does not belong to the privileged alone. The mansion's silence was finally broken, not by wealth, not by authority, but by the courage of a woman who refused to be silent. And as the story spread beyond those gates, it carried with it a question too heavy to ignore. How many voices are still silenced today, not because they cannot speak, but because no one chooses to listen?